Hey guys, it's Malachai here once again, and today I wanted to show you a bit of a variation on the Facebreaker shield charge build that I've been showcasing for the past week or so into something pretty easy to respec into, only takes about 20 regrets, and makes somewhat of a more stable and well-rounded like single target heavy build too. I by no means had any problems with my Facebreaker single target. It was just sometimes lackluster and really required relying on the totem quite a lot. This build is still somewhat similar. You'll be relying on the totem plenty, and it's mostly just to do with the Void Heart ring, which gives you bleed and poison on hit with all of your attacks, including the totem, who will also be getting poison and bleed. And it also relies on the Breath of the Council mace, which has solid physical damage and some extra poison, chaos, all that sort of shit, which I'll show you in a second. And it ends up making for a fairly tanky, except for, this Malachai fight here, fairly tanky build because you still have the same sort of parameters as the previous build of Facebreaker shield charge, except you no longer wear an Abyssus anymore, so it's something like 6k life and a bunch of armor and fortify and good leech and all that. And the single target is pretty decent for what it is. It is only here, tier 15 core Malachai, where it kinda looks like it starts to slow down, but it did allow me to get through a deathless, maybe deathless? I can't remember if it was deathless. Core run or two. I did a few core runs, and Malachai with his mods is still pretty fucking insane, but when he doesn't have too many crazy mods, he's very doable, and you can take most of the hits that he throws out at you. But before I show you that, I'll show you the setup I'm currently running. The setup basically revolves around this ring here, Void Heart, which has a 100% chance to cause bleeding and poison with all of your melee hits, meaning you can then scale quite insane bleed and poison dot damage with Earthquake, because Earthquake has a lot of different multipliers that actually benefit you, like benefit both things, like the Aftershock, which deals 78% more damage, applies to both. Less duration, not sure if I have one, yeah, that 28% more damage, which does also reduce the duration of your dot, but is worth using for Earthquake and that, and in the end you just scale quite some decent dot damage with vulnerability as well. And as well as that, I'm using a Breath of the Council Carnal Scepter, which is the new mace from from the High Council, whatever the shit it is, Pale Council. And it's a pretty decent choice for a one-hander, but you can of course go into a nice solid two-hand spec with this and just hit harder. But this is a nice baseline weapon, especially if you want to maintain the use of a shield. Because in the end we do have something like 6k life still, no abysses, and plenty of damage otherwise. We grab a Dodri's Damning just so I can have temp chains on top of vulnerability, running both Blasphemed, since you don't really need to reserve your mana with anything else because you're basing your damage entirely off of physical, and then the bleed and chaos from poison. Now the passive tree, we don't really change too much. It costs something like 15 regrets to change into. Mostly just dropped some shield nodes, over there and rearranged a few things. End up picking up some mace nodes, which do plenty of damage, and going through here, which does some more damage too. Besides that, there's not really any differences. You may need to change your jewels up a bit too. And if you want to go two-handed instead, you still take that sort of stuff and just go through here instead and use a two-hander. Now, Malachai himself, for this build, though I was hoping I'd have decent single target damage, and I more or less do, Malachai is still an absolute bitch. So unless you have a quite OP DPS build, like a low life Blade Vortex or so, you're still not going to be chunking Malachai down too quickly or too hard. And this fight, while I think I may have died once doing it, since it was my first time here, still takes me 10 minutes to complete. So I'll spare you like the boredom of watching the entire thing. I'll just let you see the damage difference when you start attacking Piety, because Piety's, actually more of a realistic health number for what a boss should be here, and Malachai is just insane. And on top of that, you have to dodge everything, and it gets really cluttered in the last room, which isn't too bad anymore. because you can just keep dropping your totems over and over again and clearing traps in that second phase, which become very handy, and the totems you drop are actually very quick in the way you drop them. So you can just keep spamming them to clear traps around you and clearing room to actually run around and do what you gotta do. So I've just sped it up to 2 times here, and you can see it's still pretty fucking slow having to try and chunk through all of that health that he has. But as long as I've got my flasks up more or less, have my fortify up, and maybe even try and keep up endurance charges, you can tank him without too much worry. It's just when he does his tentacle beam thing, you still want to have to dodge that because it's got several elements attached to it, and he'll try and freeze and shock you. And besides that, you still have a Stib Knight to pop whenever you're trying to tank him, so that most of his hits will miss anyway. This takes another like 5 minutes of just pure running around and trying to burn him down, and eventually we do get there. And he ends up dropping a pretty fat amount of loot, which was rather surprising since you don't normally see these endgame bosses do anything special. At least anything more special than any other mob in the game. And this is a bit of a just, this is what the clear speed looks like while doing this build. It's a Tier 14 Plaza, the new map, and I had no idea what the new boss entailed, and I wanted to go in with a completely fresh perspective and try and learn the fight myself. Which is one of the reasons we play softcore, because you're going to get fucked by things you don't know what they do, especially in this game. So the boss is like the scales of justice that are on top of his arrow, and first things first, she just shoots a beam at you, and there's not much you can do about it, apparently. And I just felt screwed. But the mechanics of the beam turn out to be, it's got nothing to do with line of sight like I thought over there. Oh, and also she hits really hard with that barrage, I have now learned. The mechanics of the beam are essentially she'll target you with a beam and attack you for something like 3 to 5 seconds non-stop. That is, unless you can outrange it while she's doing it, or just plain leech through it. So the two strategies there are essentially stand still and leech straight through it, which you should be able to do if you have decent enough damage and like some good regen or a life flask. Or the alternative is just piss off as far away as possible to the other side of the map real quick, and you'll break the cast. So the end strategy I ended up going for when I came back a second time against a much harder map mod here with GMP and vulnerability is to just plain face tank it and try and leech through it. She has GMP on this one, and you can see that's absolutely nuts, so I wouldn't recommend trying that, because if you get hit by one of those barrages, you're done for. But we took the rest of this build into some other maps. Tier 15 Comb with extra monster life and Enfeeble. This was a really good single target test for the DPS of the build, and it was somewhat lackluster. It took something like 15 seconds of just straight up face tanking, but the good thing about it is we're really quite tanky, and even though he had some map mods on him, could more or less just stand here and face tank all the way through and barely lose any life ever. This here was a Temp Chains double Dominus with minus max and lightning damage, so it's somewhat of a scary Dominus fight, at least I would have thought, but since I got some good damage in on those guys initially, I was only a bit worried about these two here, since it's minus max with lightning damage, but they never really did any damage either, and they died fairly quickly considering it was Temp Chains. Lastly though, I'll leave you with a clip or two of the Reeve Assassin Shadow with a Void Heart I've been trying to build as well, which is crit based and based on bleed and poison damage as well, that I've been trying to make, and I will probably have a more in-depth video about this one in the next few days, which has so much more dot damage, but it's a bit squishier, and I'm going to try and balance this one for the high-end maps and maybe even Uber Ziri, because the damage it does is quite nuts whenever it gets some good crits and some good dots going. And a last little clip that's completely unrelated to anything is just some cast on crit of Vortex and Frostbolt that I was messing around with on standard, because I don't know what else to do with this clip, but it is fairly interesting in that with the Vortex attached to cast on crit, if you're using Spectral Throne standing still, you can create your own sort of Iron Man core reactor thingo that he's got. It's pretty damn cool looking, but completely useless. Long story short, it looks like Vortex and Icebolt, Frostbolt, whatever it's called, are pretty useless as far as cast on crit is concerned. They're just not that good. It works, and just like a lot of spells work, but it just doesn't do too much, and I wouldn't really recommend it, but maybe you can get creative and make something nice out of it that I just wouldn't have thought of. So in any case, thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you guys next time.